Okay, so what work are they supposedly doing? Well, down here they work in chicken factories and on the farms. Some manufacturing. We've always had immigrants come in here and work hard for smaller pay. The Hispanics came in by the millions, and they busted their asses for smaller paychecks. Now the new wave of immigrants is coming in, and now they're undercutting the Hispanics. Poultry plants in Alabama, they're laying off the Hispanics, and they're hiring Haitians and Guatemalans because they'll work for even cheaper. So if you're Hispanic, they're coming for your job too. It's happening right now, all over.
They say they're contributing to, the people that are for the immigrants coming say they contribute, they take jobs that people don't want to do. Is that true here in Sylacauga?
It wouldn't be true in Sylacauga because, first of all, again, we're a small community, and sadly, most of our industry left 20, 25 years ago. We have some, but we've got people that are fighting just to get those jobs because the economy, is in the tank right now. People are struggling, and to send more competition into the job market is another difficult equation to try to balance there.
The money is a concern. People are like, we don't have the money to be giving to migrants that are coming. North Carolina is a recent example of that when they don't have any aid. You know as much as I do what they're given when they cross over and how much money they get when they are here.
Our senators have told us in a local town hall meeting that they know that many of these immigrants, when they come across the border and they're given the CHNV status, they're given the parole status. I think what that actually means is they're paroled from normal immigration requirements. So when they come in, well, their sponsors, these sponsor organizations, okay, well, they're indebted to them for coming to the U.S. But then they immediately receive, I think they told us, like $1,700. They get a cell phone. They get transportation to wherever they're going to go, and then they're linked up with temp agencies. And quite frankly, if you ask me, it's a form of legal human trafficking. It's a form of indentured servitude that these people many are entering into. As a matter of fact, I've had conversations, and the sponsors are required to have an individual that is the local end of the sponsor. The folks that are here, the Haitians, call that individual a controller, because they control everything. And I was hoping to meet with some and have some conversations and discuss how we might be able to help, but some things went down and they were not allowed to meet with me. So they are being controlled.
So far, about 500,000 immigrants from poor countries have come to our southern border. A lot of these migrants are recruited here by so-called charities that are set up at the border. These NGOs promise them, if you can make it to the border, we'll set you up. So if you can get out of Haiti and Venezuela or Nicaragua, you come to us, we'll get you set up, transportation, get you a house, get you some benefits, everything you need, just get here. Pay us about $9,000, and don't worry, you can pay us back. Well, they make it, and then the charities corral them all up, and they put them onto buses, and they stick them out in communities and states, wherever they feel like it, wherever there's jobs. They don't care where they put them. They don't care how they impact the communities. And so these poor migrants show up and they owe these charities money. They're indentured servants. One Alabama lawmaker called it a pyramid scheme. Instead of selling you product, it's selling human beings. All they care about is the number of human beings they get in this country, and then they dump them in places because they make a lot of money off those bodies. And they don't care what happens to these people. They don't care what community they cause problems in and what chaos they cause. And you guessed it, all the money from this comes from you and I. Our tax money's being used to recruit immigrants into the U.S. and provide them with money and housing and benefits and all that stuff. But of course, we have no money for disaster relief because it all went to giving the migrants EBT money and housing and all that. And they'll probably thank whoever gave them that money by voting for them one day.
Welcome back to my channel. Okay, let's get into this one right here. Woo, I hope you got through all that. I hope you got through all that, and hopefully they don't flag my channel for trying to put that video on there. Wow, incredible. And I really don't know what to say about this no more. We all know the United States is a land of immigrants for the most part, and you just can't get past some of this nonsense that's going on, right? And we talked about this in another video. If you listen, the guy mentioned not only are these guys getting sponsored by companies and corporations and charities, charities is the same thing, but they're basically indentured servants. And I did a video on that, right? And people want to think it's a joke. And when Kanye said there's no such thing as slavery, he was kind of right, right? But people are dumb. And it's been proven, not only by me, that there was no such thing as real slavery until like the 1800s. No, my fault. Until the late 1600s, when Anthony Johnson, an indentured servant, went to the court and what do you want to call the word? Can't think of it right now. But he he took his slaves to court to get them enslaved for a lifetime. Once you were a slave, you were always a slave. You got to remember that wasn't in every state. You know, they had state laws, county laws, and different things like that. So we can't say that Anthony Johnson made slavery for a servitude for all slaves that came to the United States as indentured slaves. But you know, we pointed out in that video that off rip, not only Anthony Johnson, many of black people came from Europe as indentured slaves, right? I think Anthony Johnson was Portuguese, and his father was Portuguese, and his mother was, I forget what it was. It was from some country in Africa. But you guys got to remember back then, Portuguese, they weren't the Portuguese that you see today or you think about in history. All these people were dark. It was a mixed country. A lot of these people were full-blooded black people. A lot of these people was mixed, pale skin. It was just a mixed, population back then in Portugal, right? You can go back and you can look at kings of Portugal. They were black back in those times. It's a lot of things that black people today won't accept, right? They won't accept that, you know, they were actually had all this power back in the slave days in Europe in the 1600s, 1500s, 1700s, and things like this, because they're waiting on their black leaders to tell them this, to tell these stories. But it's already history. It's already in the British Museum. It's already in museums in the United States and different things like this. You know, this this whole slave story is just crazy because it makes people they feel empowered about, you know, Egypt and Africa and stuff like that, but they don't feel empowered about their recent history because their recent history is a lie pushed by people that look like them, right? White people didn't push this history on you. Black people push this history on you. This stuff was never in textbooks until black people start promoting this stuff, right? So, getting back to the story. The guy talked about indentured slaves, and that's basically what everybody was coming to the United States. Indentured slaves. If you look up slave payrolls, they were actually paying these people. Slave payrolls, right? They kept records and everything, and paying these slaves. And if you didn't pay them, they could take you to court. That's what's so crazy. Man, what's this guy's name? Oh goodness, I forget this guy's name. He actually. Did I talk about that in another video? I thought I talked about it in another video. I can't remember his name, but he was a slave and then took his owners to court to be released because they took him out of a state, or they called it territory back then, that slavery wasn't legal, right? So he took his slave owner to court. And he ended up losing the case because of some nonsense. I forget the whole story. I have to go back and look at it. We'll do a whole video on that. It's a joke. What they're trying to tell people about slavery, it's a joke. Slaves taking their owners to court. And it says something somewhere that he had to pay hundreds of dollars to take them to court, which was equivalent to thousands of dollars today. Where did he get that money from? How was he able to show up to court in a suit and tie? How was he able to go against his owner and do anything? That's ridiculous. How was he able to hire? I mean, this is things that people need to start, the questions that they need to start asking when they look at slavery. It was illegal Dang. It was legal. 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 So it was commercial. It was legal. Right? Just like these people doing right now with these immigrants. It's legal. It's commercial laws. Man, what is this guy? I can't remember. My mind is so stuck on Anthony Johnson. And this was like a big court case. It was almost at the end of slavery. Oh God, I can't remember this guy's name. One of the biggest slave cases of all time. You guys probably can remember it right now. But the other things that make it seem so silly, the story that they're telling people, at the height of slavery, when they went to war, when they went to civil war over slavery, only 1.6 people in the United States were even enslaved. 1.6 people. Wow. Not only that, they can't explain to you how you had all these free blacks up north, college educated, in nice neighborhoods, own businesses. They cannot explain that to you. Right? What they'll explain to you is oh man, they got loose and they ran up. It was slavery up north. Slavery was legal up north. What are we talking about? So who's it running to? Second, all the black slave owners. It was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of black slave owners that owned hundreds and hundreds of black slaves and white slaves. Nobody can explain that, right? Nobody can explain how all these free blacks in the South sent their family members, who were mostly men, into the Civil War. Because they like to tell you, it's some nonsense. Oh, all these blacks that was fighting, the slave master told them to go fight. So there would be no reason to even go to war then, right? You just threw away your investment, right? So check this out. Slaves cost anywhere between $300 to $1,200 back then, right? Depending on what kind of work they did. They were a craftsman, they were a builder, they were a farmer, they were a cook. All these black slaves were coming over here with first and last names off those ships from England. Yep. And from Africa. Yep. And the white slaves too. All these people were indentured. They came over here by the tens of thousands from 1600 all the way until slavery ended. And this guy has a video actually of all those, I'm talking about rich in comparison to now. They were like millionaires in the South. Black slave owners. They were millionaires. Millionaires. Right? And some people try to cover it up and be like, oh man, it says here they was buying their family members. Right. Their family members came over here as indentured servants. Right? So they had to pay the slave owner that bought them out because it was an auction on slaves, right? The stuff that they're showing you on Roots is nonsense. This guy even got sued for taking another guy's book. It was a book about this African slave trade just on the coast of Africa, not to America, but on the coast of Africa. And I forget his name. Alex Haley wrote this book about the slave trade to America. False. And I forget the guy's name. Just look it up. Alex Haley gets sued. Whatever you want to put about lying about slavery. And Alex Haley had to pay this guy thousands and thousands, and I think it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars for lying about the whole book. But black people still celebrate it like it was real. And this guy got sued for lying, right? But your black leaders ain't gonna tell you that. So again, they will buy their family members because it was an auction. Only people that was real slaves was who? POWs and people who broke the law, right? People broke the law and POWs. There was a lot of POW Indians. When these blacks and these whites went to war against these Indians. And that's what always gets me, right? We're going to get back into the subject, but we're just telling American history. This is what gets me, right? They try to put black people and Native Americans together as being mistreated by this system, right? And if I get a chance, we'll do a video on this. Indian Wars. It is very funny looking or misleading, the history that they tell about, Indians getting their land taken. Right? Indians getting their land taken. And one of the facts is the Buffalo Soldiers went around mass murdering Indians with the United States Army. With the swiftness, with the quickness. Probably the best fighters in the military of all time. Right? When you take out technology. These guys didn't play around. They had their own brigade. Not that, it was a lot of black people who were fighting in the United States Army that was not in the Buffalo Soldiers. But the Buffalo Soldiers was just their side piece that were what you call special ops. And they went around mass murdering Indians and taking their land for the United States. But black people boast about what? They boast about they're in the same predicament as Native Americans. Let's look at Native American. What does that mean? Well, if we look in the dictionary, the term means Native American. And it says a person born in the United States. Wow. So they call them Native Americans. They don't call them American Indian, because an American would be somebody who was an Aboriginal or indigenous, right? You can't be indigenous to America if you came from Siberia, right? So your home is in Siberia, so you're not indigenous to America. So that's why they call them Native Americans. This is not their land. They're immigrants, just like immigrants are immigrants, right? So they claim their land was taken, even though it's not their land. Their land was taken by the United States government. Okay, but when we look at Indian Wars, right? I would say about 90, pull it up, look it up, list of Indian Wars. I would say about 95% of them, Indians are on the side of the Europeans, before, it became a big United States thing. Indians are allies with the United States or France or Russia or Germany or Spain or France. If I didn't say that, they're allied with all these other countries fighting another Indian tribe that was allied with either the United States, Spain, France, Germany, Russia. So what am I saying right here? What I'm saying is, how can somebody come and take your land and they say they killed 100 million Indians? How could that happen if you were fighting other Indian tribes and you were allying with the invaders? Doesn't make any sense to me. And if you read the history, it kind of doesn't make any sense neither, because if you read what do you call it? Can't think of the word, but when the Europeans settled here, Indians and Europeans, they start marrying and they start mixing. You guys, if it's 100 million Indians here, and some people come on a boat, which is, and we want to think that all these Indians were just like, were cool with each other. They wasn't. They were broken up, I don't know, maybe in 100 tribes. It was a lot, right? So what that means is they didn't want to go by one law, one religion, one political system. And why? Because there was an abundance of resources in the United States. So they didn't have to. It wasn't like that in Europe. They didn't have an abundance of resources. So they put the people all under one religion, one government, right? So they could never be unique, right? So when they came over here, the Europeans, and they just told the dummies at home, You got to come over here and, it's free land over here, blah, 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 but you got to come under our terms. They were already hardcore Christians or whatever religion they was in, because they told the dummies that they were the kings. Well, how were you the king? Our bloodlines trace back to Jesus and Moses, and that's what they tell these people. It's the first that's the first part of ruling the people. But let's get back on track. So when the Europeans came over here, they came over here, maybe 100 on a boat, 200 on a boat, whatever you want to think. And now they got to make alliance and treaties with the Indians, right? All these tribes didn't like each other because they wanted to be different. They wanted to be unique. So they was always beefing. So the Europeans made deals and made offers and made treaties with certain Indian groups so they could come over here and do business. These were businessmen. These weren't just straight up killers. They first had to. This is already documented. Why do people act stupid? Like Europeans just came over here and started killing everybody. So, anyways, I just found that funny that they put black people and they put Native Americans in the same boat. Like, you're not telling the same history. Nobody took your land. You fought with these Europeans to kill other Indians. Black people fought with these Europeans to kill other Indians and enslave other people that came over here, whether it was through real slavery or indentured slavery. Because like I said, the only people who was real slaves was people who broke the law or lost in war. There was a lot of wars going on in Europe. They had POWs over there. Send them over here. Now they're lifetime slaves, right? Same things with Indians. Same thing with Indians. Once they took their land, boom, you was getting enslaved. They took the children and you was enslaved forever. And that's why you had a lot of Indians running away to other Indians. So it's a lot to that story. But look, this is what I can say. A lot of this stuff is coming back to the people of this land, because the people of this land did a lot of crazy stuff, right? They went, look at the Spanish-American War. They went over there and killed all these people. Your great-grandfathers, your great-great-grandfathers, your great-great-great-grandfathers. You did all this stuff for the United States. Went over there, and remember the Spanish-American War was Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. Yeah. White Americans and black Americans went over there and mass murdered those people. They went over there and mass murdered them people and took their land and set up new governments, right? And if you look at the treaty, what? The United States still owns those countries. They bought them for $100 million back then. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii. Who is this? In the Philippines. It's no wonder why their colors are red, white, and blue. You guys are funny, man. So now white people are really restless, right? They're really restless about the immigrants coming to small towns. Because, what would you call it? I can't think of the word. But foundational Americans who have been around and can trace their family back to hundreds of years in the United States. And it really ain't got to be hundreds of years. But foundational Americans have been here for decades and decades and centuries. We all know what the population was always in our small towns before the year 2000s. It was white and it was black. And in the big cities, yes, they had a big immigrant population, but it was like minimized. The blacks and the whites was still the majority, and they still ran the whole thing. But now, as time went on, especially when we start getting into like the 90s, the immigrant population started to grow big in these big cities. Chicago's, your LA's, your Texas's, and stuff like that. And then coming into the 2000s, it started to get out of control in these big cities. And now, starting in the 2000s, all these immigrants started popping up in the small towns. Small towns. And when you look at history, it's just no coincidence why they've always had so-called redneck hillbillies and Negroes at odds against each other, right? Why is that? And this isn't like new to the United States. You can go wherever you can go to your Spanish countries, you can go to your Muslim countries, wherever you want to go to. In these mixed countries, what they call it is colorism, right? So they keep the light people at the throats of the dark people. And, they have these caste systems, light, you know, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, a little bit all the way until dark. It's a caste system. Or it's called colorism, wherever you go. And that's happened over there too. But it's a reason why they always kept these people at odds with each other. Redneck hillbillies against Negroes. And it was always fueled by the media, by the government, because even though these were the majority, probably like 95%, or we can go up to 98% of the people that were in the United States system first, that spread out all through the United States, they never wanted these people to be proud Americans that liked each other, that stood up for each other. It was always a rift with these two, what do you call it, black and white? I mean, we got to use these terms. We already talked about this. It's ridiculous. That's a legal construct too. And it's just funny when you look at it. Like they say, when you look at the Jim Crow, they say slavery was over. Bam, there go Jim Crow for black people. Now, they tell a story about black people had nothing. They just got out of slavery for 400 years. And listen, you're trying to tell me you just came out of slavery without a pot to piss in for 400 years, don't own nothing, can't speak English, which I keep saying, how come all these black people wasn't speaking African back then, right? Especially if they weren't going to school, right? That tradition should have passed like it was nothing, because it's a fact that black people was not going to school in the United States, even up until, the, what would you say, especially in the South, and probably like the, up until the 40s. I'm not trying to say all black people, but I'm just saying a large population of them. So I wonder why black people didn't have this big African speaking language if they came from Africa. Yeah, you came out of slavery without a pot to piss in. That's the story. You have nothing. And then guess what? Boom, they put Jim Crow on top of you, right? They say, oh man, you can't vote. You can't work here. All this stuff, right? That's what they tell you. So the North won the war. So the North that was trying to abolish slavery, they won the war. And slavery was over, and they put their people in place. You think the people who win the war let the people who lose put their people in place? What war was that? So you're trying to tell me they won the war, and they was like, you people are free, we'll see you later. Oh boy. Not. So the North, who didn't want slavery to end in the first place, it's just because they wasn't getting any tax money. They was enslaving people up north too. The South didn't want to pay all these different taxes, including a tax on a slave. So, here comes Harriet Tubman stealing slaves, right? From what I know, they was even the I can't remember the name of it, the abolitionists. I forget what, but anyways, from what I know, they were stealing slaves and selling them down south, right? They were stealing slaves from up north and selling them down south, and then getting people from the north, black people from the north, with money, with Jack, to pay to get their people back, right? And the North was doing this, so eventually it would cause a civil war. The people up north, the blacks and the whites, they said, "Oh, we can't keep having this happen to our people. We got to go to war." So that's what they was, the government was telling them. We can't stand for this no more. You keep getting your family members taken, and you keep having to pay all this money to get them back. And then vice versa, you had, the Harriet Tubman crew stealing slaves who wasn't stolen from the North. And either way, if you were somebody in the South and you was buying slaves for like, whatever money it was a lot of money back then, right? It was like almost buying a damn car today. So if you was a slave owner and you bought a slave, regardless how they came, indentured or they stole it, whatever, and you paid all this money, and here she is coming to take the damn slave. You pissed off, so this caused friction between the North and the South, and blah blah. That was a civil war. And like I said, it was 1.6 people was even enslaved during the height of slavery. So they didn't free a lot of slaves. It was just the fact that, you had greedy black slave owners, greedy white slave owners that want to keep this thing going. In the North, they didn't want to keep it going. They wanted something else. But anyways, yeah. So the North put their people in place and put that on the black people in the South, because guess what? And it was Jim Crow just wasn't for black people. No, it was for people who didn't register their land. Let me give it to you again. If you didn't register, when they say black people couldn't vote or own businesses or blah 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 in the South, and you had to go to school, right? Your children had to go to school, whatever like that. When they say it was only for black people, this was a lie. It was for white people too. Jim Crow was for white people too, and black people was voting during Jim Crow. They were owning businesses during Jim Crow. It was just, if you didn't register your land and do certain things, maybe your children had to go to school, blah blah blah, you couldn't vote. And we already talked about this. To register, it means you give it away. It's no longer yours, right? It's no longer yours. So black people didn't want to vote. Didn't want to register their land. Why? Because they didn't care about voting. Why would you vote for the North that just came down here and destroyed you? Don't make no sense. But don't worry. Martin Luther King came in the 60s and registered all the black people's land away in the South. They owned all that land and they had to pay no taxes at one time. And that's why black people couldn't vote in the South. Well, the black people that we're talking about. Wasn't all black people. All this stuff is just made up. But it's just made up. All this stuff is just made up. So yeah, that's what they're doing. Look, black people, black Americans, foundational black Americans, and foundational white Americans, they're not having children no more. White people are having like one child on average per household, and black people ain't doing too much better, like 2. So these people are losing a lot of money. These people can make a lot of money bringing these people in here for different things. Them going to the DMV, them buying food from the grocery store, them paying taxes, them doing all kind of different things that benefits different departments of the United States. And we talked about this before. Why are they bringing these people in here? Because these people who run for certain offices, even president, guess what? The companies and corporations pay for their campaigns, right? These millions and millions of dollars. And then you got lobbyists, which are these companies and corporations that pay these politicians in different departments all this money to pass laws. They're not working for you. They're working for the companies and corporations. That's who the politicians are working for. We made a video on this. Your vote doesn't count. It only counts for the popular vote, which is a feel-good vote. Then you got the electoral college, right? Who's involved with that? The politicians, the state politicians. And that's the only vote that counts, is their vote. So what we can't do is beat up on immigrants, right? And Trump ain't gonna make this no better. And I tell people, Trump is telling people that he's gonna send these people right back when he comes in office. Why would you do that? They did what the president told them to do. Come across the border by the millions, illegal, got rewarded for it. set them up in houses, took them in planes, buses, everything to different destinations with money in their pocket from taxpayers. And they did what they were supposed to do. So how could you send them back? So we got a thing called the Department of Immigration, right? Where you're supposed to do it right? It's illegal what he told them to do. So whose fault is that? That's the Democrats' fault, right? The Biden administration. You should be looking at them and trying to bring them to justice for violating the law. Not only that, you should be giving people back their money who did it the right way, who paid thousands of dollars, to take background checks, get vaccinations, get health checked, pay lawyers to come over here and do it right, these people should be reimbursed for doing it right. It's called American greed. And when you don't know the law, you're always going to be in the dark. And this is not a thing in the United States. It's a thing wherever you go, they're replacing the people. It's not nothing new. Only thing that's new now is the people. There's more, what do you want to, I want to call it technology, you know, although we do got more technology, but it's more of an information age, right? So we can see this with our own eyes clearly, right? It's not like back in the day when they was doing this, you know, we wasn't in the information age. And yeah, they're doing this in all these countries, Europe, the Middle East, even Latin America. They're replacing the people in different other Spanish, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. They're doing it in every country because the companies and the corporations, they need new slaves. They need new slaves because what? Once they get off their indentured servitude, they don't want to live poor no more. So they move on to bigger and better things. It was the same thing in slavery. I mean, indentured slavery. They're moving on to bigger and better things. So the companies and corporations have given money to the politicians to bring in more slaves. It's not hard to understand. It's not nobody's country. You got to remember, United States is not a country. That flag that you see is not the American flag. That's the United States flag. The United States is a district. It's a company. It's a corporation. That's all it is. The land that you're on is the Americas. It's the whole damn Western Hemisphere. So everybody in that whole Western Hemisphere is American. El Salvador, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, wherever, Brazil, Belize. What don't you get? All these people are American, right? And they work for corporations. Dominican Republic is a corporation. Costa Rica is a corporation. This is the Americas. So everybody is American. That's in this, that was born here. Or you can call them Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. But some of these people were already here. They never came from nowhere. That's the problem. That's a whole different subject. So yeah, I mean, we shouldn't beat up on anybody who comes to America, whether legal or illegal, because this is what the government is doing, has been doing, and you know, and they're gonna keep doing it. Ain't nothing you're gonna do about it. Damage is already done. United States is ran by politicians who are ran by corporations. That's it. And it's like that in every country, because all these countries are nothing but incorporated places. That's incorporated, that works with other corporations. I don't know why everybody's trying to play dumb. This is the law. This is the history. And it's not going to get no better because nobody knows the law. Tell me what you think.